Hello, I'm Steve Evans. Welcome to Business Daily. In the programme today, advice for life from the leader of the world's biggest computer chip company.
Get the best possible education you can. Make sure you do something that you love. If you're the best at what you love doing, there'll always be a place for you.
Plus, are Japanese mobile phone companies calling the wrong number?
In many ways, things that were developed here were developed exclusively for the home market, and the technologies and the features simply don't cross-apply.
All that in Business Daily from the BBC. Of course, there's a heap of things going on all at the same time with the current financial and political turmoil in America. But there's a bigger question too, and that is, are we witnessing one of those big shifts of power? Are America's chickens coming home to roost? Debt's been rising and rising there, so has a creaking economy finally snapped? And if the last 100 years have been the American century, what about the next 100 years? Now, away from Wall Street, there's a view that the fundamentals of the economy really aren't that strong, that the very engineering bedrock is actually crumbling. I turn to one of the world's big business leaders, to Craig Barret, Chief Executive of Intel, the world's biggest maker of computer chips.
The world's become much more competitive. It's a little bit like the Olympics that we just had. If you were still competing at the same level as an Olympian in 1980, you'd be left in the dust today. And to a degree, that's what our economies are facing. That's what our skilled workers are facing. They need skills for the 21st century, not the 20th century.
How do you notice it then when you employ? Do you find that graduates from India and China and Russia are better, or there are more of them coming forward? What do you notice?
Well, there's still excellent scientists and engineers from the UK and the US. The problem is, increasingly, the great fraction of engineers are of Indian background or Chinese background, Asian background, even Eastern European background. We in the West are just not producing enough engineers.
Why?
It's a complicated issue. I think our economies, our societies don't value engineering like they used to. The governments aren't putting enough emphasis on research in our universities to make it popular. Families, I think, are probably not telling their kids to major in engineering or math or science like they used to. This used to be the area that you majored in university because you were guaranteed of a good job. Now all of a sudden there's competition from around the world, and I think people are looking for a safer haven. Problem is, there is no safe haven. A lawyer in Bangalore, an engineer or a financial analyst in Singapore or Shanghai can compete with you wherever you are.
What do you tell your grandchildren? How do you instill an attitude, a whole culture, if you like?
Well, I tell my grandchildren and any other youngster that asks me exactly the same thing. I say, get the best possible education you can, and then make sure you do something that you love. If you're the best at what you love doing, there'll always be a place for you.
Let me come back to something which I kind of alluded to before, and that is, there seems to be a bit of frippery in the West, a bit of an attitude that money comes easy. And I imagine that the Chinese and the Indians don't have that attitude. And you can see it in the financial world, this idea that money just falls at your feet. You don't really have to graft for it. Do you have any sympathy with that view?
Well, I think that view is to a large degree accurate. I mean, if you go to a U.S. university and you ask the graduates, where do you want to go to work? Do you want to go to work in manufacturing and actually build something or do something? You hear the answer, no, I'm going to become an investment banker. I'm going to work at Wall Street. I'm going to manipulate money. I'm going to work in the financial engineering world. I'm not going to work in the real engineering world where we make things and we create products of value. So there has been a lot of this attitude of easy come, easy go, that the world owes me something and I don't have to work particularly hard for it. Seeing this financial meltdown today is an indication of that. You know, it's a very complicated process to explain what happened, but it has its fundamentals in kind of greed and taking risk without really understanding the risk you're taking. It's not the sort of thing engineers would do, not the sort of action engineers would take. But it is the sort of action that a large part of the economic community seems to be prone to today.
So how do we get back to what I would call a more old-fashioned, a more solid world of real values where people realize you make things, you engineer real things for real people?
Well, I think the best thing for people to do, and not everyone can do this, but is you get a lot of visas in your passport. You get around the world and you see who you're competing with. You go to the Chinese universities, you go to the Indian universities, you go to Vietnam. You see the willingness of the young people to get educated, their willingness to work hard, and you recognize our young people have to compete here. You know, we can do a good job competing athletically. I mean, if you come to the UK and Manchester United and football and so forth, world leaders here. We just had the Olympics. We both of our countries had world leaders at the Olympics. We have to make up our mind to do the same thing competing in the economic sphere. And that has to have as its fundamentals a good education for our young people, and then our government and companies investing in the future.
The 20th century was the US century, the American century, no doubt of that. Will the 21st century be the Chinese century?
It is abundantly clear that, at the very least, the U.S. and Western Europe as a whole will be sharing the 21st century with the Asians. There's no question about that. China, India, Vietnam, and other countries in Southeast Asia. There's no question that they're making huge investments in educating their young people. I think our challenge in the West is to recognize that and realize we have to compete, and we need the patience to make the investments that other people are making.
That was Craig Barret, President and Chief Executive of the world's biggest maker of computer chips. world.business@bbc.co.uk is our